During the 1920s and 30s, black creatives experienced a new era of pride and support that led to more mainstream success and opportunities in the community. Jacob Lawrence and Augusta Savage were among the most lauded artists of the Harlem Renaissance in their time. Originally called the New Negro Movement, the Harlem Renaissance was a cultural, social, and artistic upheaval that occurred in New York City's Harlem neighborhood between roughly the end of World War I and the mid-1930s. The Harlem Renaissance fostered a new era for black artists and, according to writer and philosopher Alain Locke, transformed social disillusionment to race pride. Lois Mailou Jones, November 3, 1905 to June 9, 1998, was an influential artist and teacher during her 7-decade career. Jones was one of the most notable figures to attain notoriety for her art while living as a black expatriate in Paris during the 1930s and 1940s. Her career began in textile design before she decided to focus on fine arts. Jones looked towards Africa and the Caribbean and her experiences in life when painting. As a result, her subjects were some of the first paintings by an African American artist to extend beyond the realm of portraiture. Jones was influenced by the Harlem Renaissance movement and her countless international trips. Lois Mailou Jones' career was enduring and complex. Her work in designs, paintings, illustrations, and academia made her an exceptional artist that continues to receive national attention and research. Jacob Lawrence, 1917 to 2000. Jacob Lawrence established himself as the first mainstream artist of the Harlem Renaissance when he came into success at age 23 for his 60-panel Migration series. His paintings, which he deemed to be in the style of dynamic cubism, portrayed stories of African migration from the southern to northern United States, which began in 1916. Each panel features a sentence-long caption that, when viewed in total, creates a seamless narrative of the black journey north and adjustment to new. James Van Der Zee, June 29, 1886 to May 15, 1983, was an American photographer best known for his portraits of black New Yorkers. He was a leading figure in the Harlem Renaissance. Aside from the artistic merits of his work, Van Der Zee produced the most comprehensive documentation of the period. Among his most famous subjects during this time were Marcus Garvey, Bill Bojangles Robinson and Count E. Cullen. Medavox Warrick Fuller was born in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, on June 9, 1877. Her parents were Emma, née Jones, Warrick, an accomplished wig maker and beautician for upper-class white women, and William H. Warrick, a successful barber and caterer. Her father owned several barber shops and her mother owned her own beauty salon. Warrick was, in fact, named after Medavox, the daughter of Senator Richard Vaux, one of her mother's customers. Her maternal grandfather, Henry Jones, was a successful caterer in the city. Both of her parents were considered to have influential positions in African American society. Romare Bearden, September 2, 1911 to March 12, 1988, was an American artist, author, and songwriter. He worked with many types of media including cartoons, oils, and collages. Born in Charlotte, North Carolina, Bearden grew up in New York City and Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and graduated from New York University in 1935. He began his artistic career creating scenes of the American South. Later, he worked to express the humanity he felt was lacking in the world after his experience in the U.S. Army during World War II on the European front. He returned to Paris in 1950 and studied art history and philosophy at the Sorbonne. Bearden's early work focused on unity and cooperation within the African American community. After a period during the 1950s when he painted more abstractly, this theme re-emerged in his collage works of the 1960s. The New York Times described Bearden as the nation's foremost collagist in his 1988 obituary. Bearden became a founding member of the Harlem-based art group known as The Spiral, formed to discuss the responsibility of the African American artist in the civil rights movement. Palmer See Haden, January 15, 1890 to February 18, 1973, was an American painter who depicted African American life, landscapes, seascapes, and African influences. He sketched, painted in both oils and watercolors, and was a prolific artist of his era. Archibald John Motley, Jr., October 7, 1891 to January 16, 1981, was an American visual artist. He studied painting at the School of the Art Institute of Chicago during the 1910s, graduating in 1918. Motley is most famous for his colorful chronicling of the African American experience during the 1920s and 1930s, and is considered one of the major contributors to the Harlem Renaissance, or the New Negro Movement, a time in which African American art reached new heights not just in New York but across America. Its local expression is referred to as the Chicago Black Renaissance. Augusta Christine Fells was born in Green Cove Springs, near Jacksonville, Florida on February 29, 1892, to Edward Fells, a Methodist minister, and Cornelia Murphy. Augusta began making figures as a child, mostly small animals out of the natural red clay of her hometown, Green Cove Springs, Florida. Her father was a poor Methodist minister who strongly opposed his daughter's early interest in art. "My father licked me 4 or 5 times a week," Savage once recalled, "and almost whipped all the art out of me." This was because at that time, he believed her sculpture to be a sinful practice, based upon his interpretation of the graven images portion of the Bible. She persevered, and the principal of her new high school in West Palm Beach, where her family relocated in 1915, encouraged her talent and allowed her to teach a clay modeling class. This began a lifelong commitment to teaching as well as to creating art. Sergeant Johnson was the third of 6 children, born to a father of Swedish descent and mother of African American and Cherokee ancestry. His father died in 1897, and his mother died of tuberculosis only 5 years after in 1902. Early on, Sargent and his siblings went to live with their uncle, Sherman Jackson Williams, and his wife, May Howard Jackson, in Washington, D.C. May was a pioneer African-American sculptor specializing in portrait busts with Negro themes, and she undoubtedly influenced Sergeant Johnson at an early age. Later, the boys of the family were sent to an orphanage in Worcester, Massachusetts, and the girls to a Catholic school for African American and Native American girls in Pennsylvania. Some of his siblings did not identify themselves as African American, and chose to live as either Native Americans or Caucasians, though Sargent identified as African American. Dox Thrush was born on March 22, 1893 in Griffin, Georgia. He was the second of 4 children in his family. Thrush left home at the age of 15 in search of work up north. He was part of the Great Migration, African American, looking for industrial work in the North. The first job that Thrush got was working with a circus and a vaudeville act. In 1911, at the age of 18, moved to Chicago, Illinois. He got a job as an elevator operator during the day, and used this source of income to attend school. In 1914 he attended the School of the Art Institute of Chicago. In 1917, the United States declared war on Germany and entered World War I. In September 1917, at the age of 24, Thrush enlisted in the Army. He was placed in the 365th Infantry Regiment, 183rd Brigade, 92nd Division, also known as the Buffalo Soldiers. During combat, Thrush suffered shell shock and a gas attack, but was not permanently injured. Aaron Douglas, May 26, 1899 to February 2, 1979 was an American painter, illustrator, and visual arts educator. He was a major figure in the Harlem Renaissance. He developed his art career painting murals and creating illustrations that addressed social issues around race and segregation in the United States by utilizing African-centric imagery. Douglas set the stage for young, African American artists to enter public arts realm through his involvement with the Harlem Artists Guild. In 1944, he concluded his art career by founding the art department at Fisk University in Nashville, Tennessee. He taught visual art classes at Fisk until his retirement in 1966. Douglas is known as a prominent leader in modern African American art whose work influenced artists for years to come. William Henry Johnson, March 18, 1901 to April 13, 1970, was an American painter. Born in Florence, South Carolina, he became a student at the National Academy of Design in New York City, working with Charles Webster Hawthorne. He later lived and worked in France, where he was exposed to modernism. After Johnson married Danish textile artist Holke Krake, the couple lived for some time in Scandinavia. There he was influenced by the strong folk art tradition. The couple moved to the United States in 1938. Johnson eventually found work as a teacher at the Harlem Community Art Center, through the Federal Art Project. Johnson's style evolved from realism to expressionism to a powerful folk style, for which he is best known. A substantial collection of his paintings, watercolors, and prints is held by the Smithsonian American Art Museum, which has organized and circulated major exhibitions of his works. James Richmond Barth was born in Bay St. Louis, Mississippi. His father's name is Richmond Barth and mother's name is Marie Clementine Robeto. Barth's father died at age 22, when he was only a few months old, leaving his mother to raise him alone. She worked as a dressmaker, and before Barth began elementary school she remarried to William Franklin, with whom she eventually had 5 additional children. Barth showed a passion and skill for drawing from an early age. His mother was, in many ways, instrumental in his decision to pursue art as a vocation. Barth once said, "When I was crawling on the floor, my mother gave me paper and pencil to play with. It kept me quiet while she did her errands. At 6 years old I started painting. A lady my mother sewed for gave me a set of watercolors. By that time, I could draw very well." During the next 4 years Barth followed a curriculum structured for majors in painting. During this time he boarded with his Aunt Rose and made a living working different jobs. His work caught the attention of Dr. Charles Maseo Thompson, a patron of the arts and supporter of many talented young black artists. Barth was a flattering portrait painter, and Dr. Thompson helped him to secure many lucrative commissions from the city's affluent black citizens. While many young artists found it very difficult to earn a living from their art during the Great Depression, the 1930s were Richmond Barth's most prolific years. The shift from the Art Institute of Chicago to New York City, where he moved following graduation, exposed Barth to new experiences as he arrived in the city during the peak of the Harlem Renaissance. He established his studio in Harlem in 1930 after winning the Julius Rosenwald Fund Fellowship at his first solo exhibition at the Women's City Club in Chicago. However, in 1931, he moved his studio in Harlem to Greenwich Village. Barth once said, "I live downtown because it is much more convenient for my contacts from whom it is possible for me to make a living." He understood the importance of public relations and keeping abreast of collectors' interest. Charles Henry Alston, November 28, 1907 to April 27, 1977, was an American painter, sculptor, illustrator, muralist, and teacher who lived and worked in the New York City neighborhood of Harlem. Alston was active in the Harlem Renaissance. Alston was the first African American supervisor for the Works Progress Administration's Federal Art Project. Alston designed and painted murals at the Harlem Hospital and the Golden State Mutual Life Insurance Building. In 1990, Alston's bust of Martin Luther King, Jr. became the first image of an African American displayed at the White House. Edward Joseph Dwight Jr. was born in the Kansas City, Kansas, area on September 9, 1933, to Edward Dwight Sr. and Georgia Baker Dwight. From 1924 to 1937, his father played second base and center field for the Kansas City Monarchs. As a child, Dwight was an avid reader and talented artist who was mechanically gifted and enjoyed working with his hands. He attended grade school at Our Lady of Perpetual Help in Kansas City, Missouri. In 1951, he became the first African American male to graduate from Bishop Ward High School, a private Roman Catholic high school in Kansas City, Kansas. He was a member of the National Honor Society and earned a scholarship to attend the Kansas City Art Institute. Dwight enrolled in Kansas City Junior College, later renamed Metropolitan Community College, and graduated with an Associate of Arts degree in Engineering in 1953.